Right, hello everybody. Just 1 second. Right, hi everyone. Welcome to our little Hangouts office hours, Pandorabots. My name's Steve Worswick. I'm the author, creator, and developer of the Mitsuku chatbot. And in these sessions, we just like to give you an overview of some of the AIML features that you may not be using, or you may not even have heard of, or you maybe just even want, just questions about. There is a chat window if you want to type any messages in as we go along. If you're watching this on a recording, there is a form underneath where you can ask any questions for any kind of future session. So let's get straight into it by explaining what a loop is. So let's just create some AIML files. 1 second, let's have a look. Right, so just for this, we'll call it loop. And I'll create that. Okay, so let's have a look. So let's make a quick category. So basically a loop is a piece of code that you want executed more than once. Now you can just type in the same code as many times as you need it, but that's not very efficient. So let's just say, for example, we wanted something that said count to 7. What we could do would be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. Which, okay, that will work, but it's not really. Yeah, not really very efficient, because we're going to have to write another one of those every time we want to count to a different number. Okay, so what we can do is create a loop to do something like that for us. So let me just copy one in there. Here we go. So it may look a bit scary at first, but let's just go through it line by line. So the pattern says count to and then a number. Okay. If the there's no point counting to words or anything, so this will only activate if someone says count to and then a number, and the number set is just something that's built into Pandorabots, which just recognises valid numbers. Now, when we're counting, we want to start at 0. Yeah, so we'll start our total. Just call it count 0. Just put it in think tags, so we doesn't display to the user. And now we come to the meat of the loop. All loops are held in condition statements because we're checking for the value of loop until we, just bear with us 1 second. Okay, so we're checking for the value of count to make sure it's equal to our wildcard up here. And so we do that by doing the condition name equals count. And what we're checking for here is the value of star. Yeah, so star is the number at the top there. So if we're saying count to 7, we're just checking for just a blank li statement for number 7. Now, what we're saying is when we get to that 7, stop processing. Otherwise, do what's in here. Yeah, so what we're doing is we count, we map into a pre-built Pandorabots map called successor, which just adds 1 on to the number each time. So we're setting the count to the count plus 1 in effect. Yeah. Break just means just put a line space in there, carriage returns, just so it doesn't put them all in one big lump. And then loop says do the whole thing again. So we loop back up. Is our count now equal to 7 or whatever we're counting to? No. Okay, right. Well, let's add another 1 on. Yeah. Display the number and loop back. And eventually it will be equal to 7. And so the whole thing will stop. So to show you how that works in action, now we could try count to 7. There we go. So what it's done is just looped around. It started off as 0, didn't display that because we put that in think tags. Just looped around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Once it's got to the 7th time, yeah, it set it to 7 and then stopped. Yeah. So now we can reuse this code to count to whatever we want. So Yeah, and it just loops around like that. Now, the maximum number of loops you can have is 100. If you're using more than that, it may be worth optimizing your code a little bit. But since they count to 100, does all that lot. But if you try and count too many, you'll get an error message saying too many loops are in the condition. Yeah, it's looped around more than 100 times, and so it causes an error. Okay, so as well as doing that, this is kind of similar to the old, for next loops of BASIC. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember that. But what you could do in there, let's just copy it and do this. Right. You may not want to just display every number. Let's say we only want to display even numbers. So we'll say count to 100 by 2, in steps of 2. Yeah. How could we do that? Exactly the same idea. But this time we have we're setting the count twice. So when it's 0, it'll be set to 1, 2 displays for 2, 3, 4 displays for 4, and so on. So if we try that, count to 20 by 2. There we go. So now we've just got the even numbers. Yep, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, right up to 20. Now, if the loop never finishes, let's say we say count to 11 by 2. Oops. We're getting too many loops in condition. Why is that? That's because we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll never hit 11. Yeah, 11's not an even number, and so it just loops around 100 times and then produces the error message there. Okay, so that's a way we can kind of do loops from there. Another example. Let's try. Okay, count from a number to a number. Yeah, we don't always want to start counting from 0. So pretty much similar to the first topic, the first category, but this time we're setting the count to our first number and we're checking it against our second number. Yep, so if we say count from a number to another number, exactly the same, but we don't want to start from 0, we want to start from whatever this number is here. So to try that, let's try and count from, I don't know, 3 to 12. There we go, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, yeah. Don't need to do that, so yeah, just count round and that's done that way. Okay, next thing we may want to do is we may not always want to count upwards. Don't forget, you can use any map in here. We're just using successor because most of the time it's numbers we want to kind of, we want to activate the same piece of code so many times. But let's try and count backwards from a number, okay? So this time, we're setting the initial count to whatever this number is. So let's say count backwards from 10. So it sets for count to 10. So it'll display 10, put a line break. Checks around the loop. Predecessor is an inbuilt map for Pandorabots, which reduces a number by 1. So you go from 10, 9, 8, 7, yeah, right down to 0. Yeah, checking the li value of 0. So this should say count backwards from 10. So it should go 10, 9, 8, and so on. So let's see if that works. Count backwards from, I'll do 10. I've got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and right down to 0. So once it hits the 0, you can put anything in here, as long as it is likely to be hit by your loop, otherwise you're going to get the errors that we saw earlier. So yeah, it just counts down, reaches the target, 0, yeah, and then it stops. Yes, as I say, a predecessor is just an inbuilt map that you can use to like subtraction, and it's just the number before it. Now you don't just have to work with numbers. What we can do as well, let's try name some countries. Now I have a map in here with a few countries on it. So as you can see, it's just a list of countries. Let's just make it a bit easier to read. So there's a start of a list, and then it's just various bits and bobs and bits and bobs. all the way down to, I think, Germany. Yeah, Germany is the last one in the list. Yeah, so it's a list about each one maps onto the next one in the list. Yeah, so don't need to. We'll save it. Excuse me. So if I go in here, so name some countries. Okay, so start of our list, start. Yeah. Now we don't want to display that back to the user because that's not a part of the country. So we'll just say start there, and what it'll do, it looks at the country. Is it equal to end, which is the end of our list? If yes, stop. If not, just map the next one on the list. Do a break just to have a line space and then loop back up. So this should display the entire contents of that map of all these countries, and then it should say the word end at the end. So let's try that. Name some countries. There we go. And here's our list of countries. Yeah, so it's gone from start down to China. China then mapped on to France, France to Spain, and so on until it reached our end. Now, what you may find is occasionally, if you try something like this, you may get errors saying, the too many loops. What that means is more than likely you've got a spelling error or something like that in your list. So if I do just spell something wrong on purpose there, say name some countries, doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because it gets as far down as Denmark, but it's actually Denmark, and I don't have any entry in the map for that. So the whole thing grinds to a crash. Yeah. So yeah, you don't just have to do numbers as long as it's something that you can check, something that's changing. I mean, the value you're checking has to change, otherwise it's going to be an infinite loop. But more often than not, you probably won't want to just start counting. You probably want it to actually do something. So let's make a category. We'll draw some lines. So to do, let's just make one here. Oops. So we'll call this, no, we'll call it draw line. And we'll do something like that. Let's just have a break to separate them, otherwise it's just going to be one big lump. Okay, so what I'll do, draw line. Yeah, does as you expect, draws a line. Okay, now let's say we've got this category here, draw X number of lines. Okay, now you can put all this, the draw line category actually in the loop, but to my mind, it just keeps it a bit simpler and a bit easier to maintain. If you do the loop, you actually call it out using a array. So to do that, it's the same as we've done before. So we draw X lines. Okay, so we'll start counting at 0. Check the value. Is it 0? Is it X? No. So what we'll do is we'll increase the number, increase the loop count, and then just call the draw line category down there. So if we say draw X number of lines, it should loop around X number of times, calling this draw line category each time. So let's see if it works. So we'll say draw 5 lines. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So what it's done, it's kind of looped round and done 5 lines there. Now that to me is easier than, I mean, this is pretty simple. I mean, you could just do, something like that. But it's once you get something a bit more complicated, or if it's processing something, it's easier just to call it out using that. So the final thing I want to cover with loops is nested loops. Okay. Now, what you could do, used to be able to do in BASIC, if any of you guys remember that, is you could say something like I don't know. You can create like little loops here. Yeah, you could kind of do that sort of thing. So like loop round there 5 times, increase A by 1, loop round another 5, and so on and so on. So you got all 25 runs. You can do that in AIML as well. So let's make a let's have a think. Right, what we'll do is we'll create like a little pattern that'll make a triangle. So let's just do a triangle line. Okay, so what this is going to tell me is triangle line and then a number and then print as many X's as we've specified in there. So let's see if this works. Triangle line 4. Yeah, 4 X's. Right, that's great. So to make our triangle, we need to call that with different numbers, different values. So we say triangle and then a number. This is how deep we want the triangle to be. Set a variable count. We call it count 1. Very important that you keep the predicate names unique. If you have that count 1 and you was calling this one as count 1 as well, it's just going to get itself in a twist. They must be unique in order to loop around. So I've just called it count 1 and count 2. So what it's going to do, just checks the value to see if it's same as our triangle, loops round. For every time it loops round, we're going to call its triangle line with a different number, which is slowly increasing. So if this works, there's nothing like live coding, is there? But if this works, then there's hopefully it should be like a kind of a step pattern like that. So let's try it. So we'll say triangle. Let's go for 8. So this should produce 8 lines with 1x, then 2x, 3x's, and so on to make a kind of a triangle shape. And oh, it actually works. So yeah, there we go. So what it's done, it's kind of called this loop, 8 times, and in each of the one, it's done a number and it's looped around there. So using just this one X, we've managed to make this nice, pretty picture. Okay, right. I think that's probably about it for loops. So just a few things to bear in mind. If you're not using Pandorabots, you're not going to have these map successors. Unfortunately, you're going to have to kind of code your own. So, I'd hardly recommend that you don't go to Pandorabots, but you can do it separately yourself. So let's go to our initial one here. So we started off with count to a number. So what you're going to have to do is make your own map, unfortunately. So kind of how I've done there. So 0 maps to 1, 1 maps to 2, and so on. So I can say instead of successor, which is the inbuilt one, call it test. Now if I say count to 3, 1, 2, 3, yeah. But if I say anything too large, yeah, because we only set a map up to 6. So it's depending on how big your loop's going to be, it's maybe not be too much use for that. So I would recommend you use maps for that. Sorry, Pandorabots. So you've got the successor and the predecessor. Now, if you're not using the AIML 2, you're not going to have access to maps at all, or in fact loops. So you're going to have to do these kind of loops a different way. And if I take a look, okay, so here's one in that I've made earlier. Just call this X counter. Now this is doing exactly the same thing, but without maps. And as you can see, I'm having to use kind of all these categories and make my own version of a map down here. So what this is saying is X count to 5. Okay, we want it to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it starts the initial one as 0. What's the target we need to count to? It's 5. Okay, right, call the count loop. So all this does is it sets the counter, increases it by 1 each time, and it does that by doing this. Now we can see again, if we want to count to more than 10, we're going to have to start adding all these numbers here, which isn't so bad if there's only 10 or 20. But if you suddenly decide you need to increase that to 100 or so, or various nested loops, it's going to be quite messy. But it should work. So let's try it. X count, oops, to say 5. Yeah, it still works. So all it's doing is just producing a number and just looping around so many times. If we do it too many, it's just going to loop around, stick forever, and say too much recursion. It's the different error message than the loop one because we're not using loops. So it's just it's run around this loop so many times that it's crashed out, unfortunately. Okay, so yeah, that's loops. You're welcome to pause the video, reset it back, and things like that. And I hope that was useful for you. And I'll see you for the next one. As I say, if you do have any questions, please use the form that's in the comment section, in the video description, or chatbots.org, as well as the great AIML sections, which I'm a moderator there, so happy to answer any questions if I can. I'd much rather do it that way than people actually email me with questions, because then if somebody does have the same query, they can just search and the answer's there on the internet for anyone else to find. Okay, so thanks for joining, and I'll see you all on the next one. Bye.